Anyway, the which I feel confident in 1965, while working for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, I was, through another member, a female member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, presented the topic of Zionism. This female member, Snake, happened to have come in contact while working in South America with Palestinian forces. I myself had no scientific understanding of Zionism, and started within the circle of Snake quietly, unbeknown to certain elements. We had every month we read one book on Zionism, and since 1965 till today, at least, I read one book a month on concerning Zionism, or broaden it out, of course, the history of Judaism. I've attended many anti-Zionist international symposiums in Baghdad, in Tripoli. I've attended many meetings of the Palestine National Corporation, Palestine National Council, Palestine National Congress, and of course I've had great working relationships with anti-Zionist forces within the Jewish community. In order for us to properly understand the topic, a clear delineation must be made between Judaism and Zionism. I understand that this creates certain problems in certain elements within the society. But even if one doesn't agree with my statement, at least one should understand the general outlines which allows me to arrive at the statements that I do. Of course, Judaism is a religion. And we know that religions, of course, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels in the Communist Manifesto said that religion is the opium of the masses of the people. Of course, this statement is correct in the particular instance of Europe. It is not correct, generally speaking. The error that is made by those who've been dominated by Europe is that the particular history of Europe usually becomes the general history of the world. And this certainly should not be done. We said in the particular instance where Marx and Engels both said that religion is the opium of the masses of the people, they were correct for Europe. If one would look properly at Europe, one would see that Europe has never produced any universal religion. All universal religions that have come to Europe have come from the outside: Judaism, Islam, Christianity. One would also look that the question of religious differences in Europe is dominantly intolerant. That is to say, they burn Jews at the stake, they burn Muslims at the stake, they burn Christians at the stake, they burn non-believers at the stake. Outside of Europe, certainly in Africa, which we may use as an example, the problem of religious intolerance, the problem of religious differences is not dominantly intolerant, but dominantly tolerant. That is not to say that in Africa one does not find religious conflict here and there, but it is not the normal way of life. Thus, this question is particular to Europe. The question of Zionism, too, will have a lot to do with the particular history of Europe, not with the particular history of areas outside of Europe, and particularly Africa. Of course, this question of Judaism as a religion is necessary for us to understand. As a revolutionary, I understand, unlike Mr. Marx and Mr. Engels, that religion is not the opium of the masses, but on the contrary, religion must be used as an arm by the revolutionary forces. Certainly, our history has demonstrated this. Just since we're speaking all the time of Martin Luther King is a clear example, but even if you go back through our history, you will find those who've been inspired to fight for the people, that their motivations come from religious inspiration. So, we then, as revolutionaries, do not consider religion to be the opium of the masses, not us. We say the position here is entirely different in Africa. The religion of Judaism and Zionism must be, the religion of Judaism and the political philosophy of Zionism must be completely separated. Judaism is a religion. As an African, I'm very proud of this religion because it was given to the world by my people. Judaism began in Africa. We must be clear here. Of course, forces seeking everywhere to store up nonsense will make it appear as if Africa didn't give Judaism to the world, but others came from the outside and gave it to Africa. This is nonsense, bourgeois lies, and racist manipulation against Africa. Africa gave monotheism to the world, belief in one God. And at the time that Africa gave monotheism to the world, belief in one God, every other area surrounding Africa were believing in cows, were believing in moons, were believing in the sun. It was Africa and Africa alone that gave monotheism to the world. That is why Judaism had to be born in Africa. It presented the proper conditions for Judaism to be born there. Sigmund Freud in his book, Moses and Monotheism, his last book, and the book usually hidden, it's hard to get, and I don't see why. I find the book to be a particularly interesting book, and the conditions under which it were written. Mr. Freud began to write the book, I believe, in Austria, and because of Nazi occupation, he had to leave, and he took all the notes with him and went to Britain and hurried very much to write the book. Of course, this book, the Moses and Monotheism, here, Freud comes to show through archaeological proofs, Freud comes to show through historical proof, so Freud comes to throw through psychoanalytical proof that Judaism began in Africa, and not only this, that Moses himself was an African. Of course, the early priests of the religion were Africans, as they had to be. They were the ones who recorded the religion. Thus, when I take a position against Zionism, for example, when I hear people tell me that I'm anti-Semitic, which makes no sense at all because Judaism has nothing to do with Semitic people. One is a religion, the other is a biological specification, and the Palestinians certainly are Semitic. Mr. Arafat is a Semite. So if I support the Palestinians, I cannot be anti-Semitic, that's clear. But this is all confusion here. And this confusion is well done to keep people more confused. But we're revolutionaries, and we believe in dialectics. Out of confusion comes clarity. Since because our time is limited and we want a lot of time for question, we want to make it clear. Judaism was given to the world by Africa. This is clear and undeniable fact. Those who wish to look at the history and we can develop it, look. Zionism is a political philosophy. It did not come out of Africa. The first organizational conference of Zionism, if my memory serves me correctly, was in 1897 in a place called Bâle, Switzerland. B-A-L-S-E. The reason why this meeting had to be held in Bâle, Switzerland, was because the majority of Orthodox Jewry in Europe was against Zionism, totally against it. We must look properly at Zionism, its beginning, and its founder, a man by the name of Theodor Herzl, H-E-R-Z-L. Mr. Herzl was, of course, bourgeois from his toes to his top of his head. He was bourgeois. As bourgeois as you can get. He didn't think about the proletarian. As a matter of fact, Mr. Herzl himself was not a religious person. It's extremely important. And we'll want to read his diary. He himself says that he's an atheist. You must understand the word properly. An atheist does not just not believe in God. An atheist makes the affirmative statement that God does not exist. Thus, Mr. Herzl is an atheist. I could never understand, until this day it is incomprehensible for me to understand. How is it that Zionism, a political philosophy, born thousands of miles away from Judaism, one born in Africa, the other in Europe, born thousands of years different from Africa, thousands of years of difference, one doubt, Judaism thousands of years ago, Zionism 1897, and how is it that they can link each other together? And according to the philosophy of Zionism, that they feel that somehow that they have some relationship to Judaism, and this promised state that God promised his chosen people. Mr. Herzl did not believe in God. Not only did not believe in God, he said that God did not exist. Now, he who tells me that God does not exist sets out to find a place that God promised to his chosen people. If this is not ludicrous, and this is the basis, of course, of Zionism, so you can see here the contradictions just everywhere. According to Mr. Herzl, Jews, and the theory that he said is that Jews were discriminated against all over the world. This is not true. In Europe, yes, but not all over the world. We must never make the particular history of Europe, the general history of the world. There's no question that Judaism had trouble in Europe, but we said all religions had trouble in Europe, so that's nothing new for Europe. These are historical facts. Consequently, we must not confuse it. But Mr. Hertz and those who are Zionists say that there's a hatred for Jews which is innate in human beings. This is unscientific garbage. How can anyone tell us, which preaches a religion, that someone cannot be transformed to a higher state when religion is about transforming human beings to a higher qualified state? They come to make an unscientific statement. Not only does Mr. Herzl say that people have an innate hatred for Judaism, but he says this innate hatred, which we who are non-Jews have, will continue forever. Even making an unscientific statement that nothing changes. Everything changes all the time. And certainly if one can be a heathen and become a believer, one who hates Jews can come to understand and correct oneself and come to appreciate Jews and may even become a Jew themselves. Consequently, this statement that innate hatred that the people have against Judaism is garbage, stupidity, unscientific nonsense. Zionism is a political philosophy. According to Mr. Herzl, the Jews were oppressed everywhere, and they needed a state, a country, which would save them and give them the right to protect themselves. Thus he called, look at the stupidity. He says that everybody in the world is against Jews. They hate Jews, and now he wants to collect them in one spot where we can all come and get them. Clear stupidity, every aspect of it. Here, Mr. Herzl comes to tell us that not only are we innately against Jews and that we will never change, but the only way Jews themselves will protect themselves is when they come to have their own country. We said Mr. Herzl began in 1897. That great man, V.I. Lenin, at the turn of the century, wrote a book entitled Imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. Is it? Imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism? Yes. If one would read this little pamphlet, one would see here that Mr. Lenin had precisely pointed out that all of the world had already been conquered and divided by colonial powers. There was no else in the world left to be conquered or divided by colonial powers. This is the time when Zionism comes to rise. Zionism comes to look for a state when everywhere else in the world is already dominated. Thus, in order for Mr. Herzl to get a country for Zionists, what he did was to attach himself to imperialism, British imperialism in this case, quite specifically. Of course, as an African who suffered under the heels of British imperialism, I can have no love for it, and certainly I cannot love anyone who attaches themselves to it and attaches themselves to it for the foundation of a state and then call this a liberation movement. Liberation movements fight against imperialism, not with it. Clearly here. The legal foundation of the State of Israel is what is known as the Balfour Declaration. This declaration was issued in 1917. A man in the government of Britain named Balfour wrote a paper and promised the Jews a national home. The national home he promised them was an area which Britain was colonizing, Palestine. Palestine didn't belong to the British. Just like Ireland doesn't belong to the British, even though they have troops there. But here, these British imperialists signed a note and gave it to the Jews, and they accepted it. Where is the morality for this? If you say that Israel belongs to you, then you don't go to a thief to get Israel, you go and take it. Once you go to an immoral being such as British imperialism, and this is the basis for you getting the land, then clearly here those who are truly liberation fighters must question this. The basis, we say, is the Balfour Declaration, and Zionists know it. Now, Zionism is certainly not a liberation movement because it never fought against any imperialism. As a matter of fact, today, Zionism is the baby, child, and infant protector of imperialism in the Middle East. It carries out the interests of American imperialism. As a matter of fact, Zionism and American imperialism is like this. If our tax dollars would stop giving money to Israel, the state would sink tomorrow. And certainly no one can deny that American imperialism is the leading imperialist nation in the world. So we cannot see how a liberation movement is so tied, string and ham to American imperialism. They work hand in hand with American imperialism. Thus they can hardly be a liberation movement. In addition to this, Zionism has nothing to do with anything religion, nothing. All religions are concerned with human beings after they die. That's what religions are for. Islam will tell you what happens to you when you die. As a matter of fact, this which forces you to live a good life so that after death you'll be able to enjoy the rewards of heaven. The same is true for Judaism. But Zionism says nothing about the individual after they're dead. They don't give a damn about you. The Zionism has nothing to do with religion at all. And one should not make the confusion here. The Palestinian state belongs to the Palestinian people. This is a fact. Of course, Zionism in the early days made all sorts of nonsensical propaganda. Oh, they ran away, they left the land. I saw one, he said, well, you know, they ran away and left the land. I said, well, they want to come back now? So just get out the way and let them come back. If you said they just ran away on their own. No. Zionism took Palestine through raw and naked terrorism. Naked. Even that butcher, Begin, he will never rest in peace. He who came into a village and terrorized the village to scare the people to run out and was proud of it. This is how Zionism conquered the land. They didn't conquer it not even with the Torah. They conquered it with the gun passed to them from American imperialism, British imperialism. All the imperialist countries in the world supported them. The Palestinian people have been totally driven out of their land. And Zionism comes to use as a justification for the state religion. There's no state in the world that can claim it's a state because of religion. That's not possible. Zionism cannot say that Jews belong to any one race. They cannot, because we know that Judaism came out of Africa, and the earliest Jews in the world were Africans. Even today, they must admit that those in Ethiopia are Jews, and therefore should come to Israel. So once you admit this, you admit that, oh, Judaism then is not... This question of Zionism is not a question of race, but what this is a nation, of course. But a religion is not a nationality. Nor is a religion a nation. Religion transcends, that's the correct word. Religion transcends the boundaries, national boundaries. We know that Islam, for example, began in Saudi Arabia. But you will find Frenchmen born in France who adhere to Islam and are true Muslims. It transcends geographical boundaries. We know that Africa stabilized Christianity for the world. But everywhere in the world today you will find Christians. Religions transcends geographical boundaries. Consequently, Zionism must come to understand that it cannot claim or have anything to do with religion if it doesn't seek to transcend geographical boundaries. And it does not. As a matter of fact, it makes itself boundaries. Of course, these boundaries are not declared. Israel is the only state in the world with undeclared boundaries. Every other state has them except Israel. Zionism itself shows itself in the flux that it is. Even though in the Zionists want to brag about the intellectual superiority that they have, even today, they haven't decided in Israel who is a Jew. Yet they've taken the land for Jews, and they haven't yet decided who is a Jew. Of course, the relationship of Zionism and Judaism and Jews must be properly understood. Zionism dominates all Jewish organizations throughout the world. They were able to do this during World War II. Now you must understand something about the Judaic religion. This question of the chosen people must be properly understood. Of course, God can never choose any of his children over any of his children, that's clear. Because while governments may discriminate, God cannot. But one can be chosen by God if one chooses God. And so once you choose God, you become God's chosen. And you choose God to do God's work. And of course, if you will look through all religions, the majority of them, they all have a theme running through them which say that in order to be redeemed, one must suffer. And Judaism takes seriously this axiom of religions. The theory of Judaism is that the Jews must suffer for humanity, for the cause of humanity, and their suffering will redeem not only them, but all of humanity. Certainly, this attitude in life must be saluted by every serious man and woman. This attitude towards the willingness to suffer for all of humanity, for that it be redeemed, must be appreciated by all revolutionaries. Because when we speak of chosen people, we must understand precisely the context in which it is done, in which it is said. So that means that not only a Jew's chosen people, but a Muslim who truly chooses God, a Christian who truly chooses God, anyone who truly chooses God is God's chosen people. We said the basis for it, any other way, will make it appear as if indeed it is a discriminating God, and no one can believe that God discriminates. God must be a God of justice. The Ture tells us this everywhere. Zionism then has absolutely nothing to do with Judaism. It seeks to confuse the people. Of course, this is the job of all political philosophies, all backward political philosophies. They seek to dominate religions and to use religions as a tool in their exploitation. Imperialism was able to do it so well with Christianity that Christianity hunted slaves for imperialism. But in no way does this mean that we attack Christianity. No! When we judge a system, we judge it by its principles, not by its adherents. Were we to judge any system by its adherents, all of them will have to be destroyed because human beings are weak in relationship to their fidelity to principles. We do not judge Christianity by Christians. We judge it by its principles. Were we to judge Christianity by Christians, all of us would agree it should have been wiped out the face of the earth a long time ago. We do not judge Islam by Muslims, not even Khomeini, notwithstanding. We judge it by its principles. Just in passing, do not let capitalism, this stupid and backward system, confuse you. You do not judge socialism by socialists. Thus all their nonsense about the East only threatens those who know nothing about socialism. I'm a socialist, Jack, and it hasn't shaken me a bit. The principles of socialism are intact. Thus there must be no confusion here. The principles of Zionism are unjust. The question is whether or not Zionism is white supremacy. I need not answer the question. The United Nations gave the answer years ago. They said Zionism is racism. And certainly given the power of lobby that the state of Israel has worldwide, you know that if this vote came down in the United Nations, it was after a serious struggle, and there must have been a determined voice to ensure it. Zionism is racism, according to the United Nations. So this one, I won't even hide behind the United Nations. I know it's racism. Anytime you will take a people's land and come to take, well, anyway, Zionism itself does the same thing that imperialism did with Christianity. Zionism seeks to dominate Judaism. And just like some Christians were catching slaves in the name of God, so Jews are shooting Palestinians in the name of God. But of course, in no way does this shake our faith in Judaism. Not at all. Zionism, of course, has certain conditions which allow for it to arise. We said they came to control Judaism after World War II. We explained that Zionists have a feeling, that Jews, not Zionists, Jews have a feeling that, number one, they come to accept the suffering of the world to redeem humanity. And the Jews have been thinking, according to their history and according to their religion, that if they kept on going and suffering, that at one time, somewhere, a Redeemer will appear, and this Redeemer will help them and lead them towards a higher level of human society for the entire world. But if you look at the suffering of the Jews in Europe, you will see they suffered everywhere. Everybody gave it to them. The Russians gave it to them. The Spanish gave it to everybody. The British, everybody. They were tormented. There's no question here. Tortured in Europe. This is clear. And these Jews, the honest Jews, the serious Jews, the religious Jews, they were looking for a Redeemer. And when they thought their Redeemer was to come, and even if you look at the history of Judaism in Europe, you will see they had many false prophets, opportunists who came to jive the people, just like Christian jackleg preachers come to jive us. No difference. We're the same people. All people. Yes, they came to jive them and to make believe they were prophets. They were not. They were false prophets. And if you study the history of Judaism, the Jews faced seriously for following these false prophets. But they kept believing and believing that really their Redeemer was coming. And they thought around 1939, 1940, their Redeemer would come, and Hitler came. And when Hitler came, the rabbis were completely lost for direction. They could hardly explain to the people. It was now that Zionism stepped in. Yes, we are Jews, but we must do like everybody else. We must take what belongs to us. And since Israel belongs to us, we must take it. And until we take Israel, this suffering will continue. I must tell you that the Zionists worked hand in hand with the Nazis. I understand it precisely. Work hand in hand with the Nazis was to scare the Jews and to give them the political power to dominate Jewish organizations. Needless to say that after 1948 with the state of Israel, it was a fiat accompli. At this time, Zionist organizations controlled all Jewish organizations. We want to make it clear here, not all Jews in these organizations were even aware of the fact that Zionism controlled their organizations and thus directed their energies towards Zionist goals. Here, of course, it could be easily made with confusion because these Jews were wanting to go to Israel, and Zionists got Israel, and Israel is our home and our spiritual base, etc., etc. You can see how easy it is to confuse. But we cannot be confused. Any religion that oppresses our people must be fought with without pity and without mercy. And no one can tell me that Judaism is a religion which comes to oppress Palestinians. It's Zionism that does this, not Judaism. Of course, Zionism tries to hook Judaism together, making them one and the same. This is to help them. By doing this, because no one wants to attack a religion, who wants to attack a religion? It's just like when they say anti-Semitic, which has no meaning at all. They want to get you afraid. Who wants to attack a people? But they're not even Semites. Golda Meir is a Cossacoid. This is a biological fact. It's a biological. All the leaders. Abba Eban was born in South Africa. There's nothing Semitic about him. He is Cossacoid 100%. Thus, there's no question here when they talk about anti-Semitism. They may say that I'm anti-Judaic. That's the best they can say. But I'm a conscious African. I gave the religions of the world. I cannot be against the contributions of my ancestors. So in no way can I be anti-Judaic. But I am anti-Zionist and will remain so until it is destroyed because it is an unjust, illegal, immoral, and racist system. What is the solution? The solution is correct, as handed down by the Palestine Liberation Organization. The state of Palestine must be secular, mandate state. It's as simple as that. The Jews must come to understand that this is their fight. And unless they take on this fight, they will allow Zionism to make their religion a gutter religion, as Farrakhan says it will become. Thus, Jews have a responsibility here, and we want to let it be known that there are many Jews who are anti-Zionist, many, even here in America. And they write some very good books, excellent books. So Jews cannot confuse us and say all Jews are Zionists. No, even the Orthodox Jews in Brooklyn, they say a Zionist can never be a Jew, and a Jew can never be a Zionist, and they're correct. It's like God and the devil. We say the Palestinians have the correct solution to the problem. The state of Palestine must be a secular state. Those of us who truly are against Zionism have a double fight here. Not just a fight against Zionism by all means necessary, but also a fight against those who are intolerant of Judaism. A true way to undermine the force that Zionists have in the Jewish communities throughout the world is to ensure the tolerance of the religion of Judaism and use force where necessary to ensure this tolerance. Thus here, an educational program is necessary, but we point out here, this educational program necessary for the tolerance of Judaism is attacked clearly towards Europe, because it is Europe that is intolerant. Anyone would look throughout the world and see Jews have lived in harmony throughout the world. It is only with the intrusion of Zionism into the Middle East, into North Africa, that one finds problems between Judaism and non-Jews in these areas. It is Zionism that caused all this. There's no question that Zionism will be destroyed, not one. Even today we can see it's growing. I remember in 1967, when as chairman of SNCC, the last act I did before resigning as chairman was to write a press conference against the Israeli war of 1967. I didn't read the statement because that would have caused too much problems as I was writing. It was read by a brother at that time who was called Rab Brown, Jamil El Amin today, and he sure read the statement. The statement was clear. When we read the statement, we were isolated by everybody. SNCC was called everything, and I saw the power of Zionism. I came to see it. I came to know it. The Student Nonviolent Court, MAD, took a strong position against the war in Vietnam. Not only did we take a position against the war in Vietnam, but we took a position against Zionism, against imperialism itself, and the army in America by issuing the slogan, "Hell no, we won't go." We intended to break the draft, and we broke it. Thus not giving American imperialism the chance to suck up youth who knew nothing and send them off to die for the interests of imperialism. But while we did this, Zionists everywhere supported SNCC. While people isolated us, we spoke against the Vietnam War. We spoke against the draft. They supported us. But once we spoke against Israel, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was destroyed in 3 months. These are facts. These are facts. Oh, I remember those who were weak and sick at that time. The weak came and said, "We've got to stop." Stop? Are you crazy? Stop. This is Africa here, and we have integrity. What do you mean, stop? Man, we continued, and we suffered for it, and suffered seriously. Just because we took a position, and our position was clear. Egypt is Africa. How is it that you expect me, an African, to sit in America? You, a Jew, a Zionist is what you are. You supporting Israel, attacking Egypt, and I can't say nothing. Oh, Egypt is Africa, Jack. You touch that, you touch me. Everywhere but today, Zionism is no longer as powerful as it was in America. It's being questioned everywhere and attacked all the time. It's weaker today than it was then. I remember in our African community, they even formed a committee called, Blacks in Support of Israel Committee, BASIC. Andrew Young was a member of it. Oh yes, all of them. The names are there. History doesn't cover anything. In the African community, even now when we spoke against Zionism, they put others to confuse us. Even Martin Luther King himself was confused on this issue. When we attacked Israel, he said any attack on Israel, this is a quote, any attack on Israel, no matter how you camouflage it, is an attack on Semitism, is anti-Semitic. Poor King was confused. He was very confused. To attack Israel has nothing to do with anti-Semitism, but we can understand. King could not take the position we took. King's support came clearly from Zionists, who didn't say they were Zionists, but of course any attack against Israel would have meant serious problems for King. But for us, we had nothing to worry about except the truth. And the truth was that they were attacking Israel. Israel is our home, and we had to defend Africa. So King himself was confused, but today, even those who follow King's footsteps, like Reverend Jesse Jackson, had to go and meet with Arafat. In conclusion, I want to show you sincerely how Zionism has come to control the thinking of the people. We know imperialism gives what is known as a one-sided view of history, one-sided. In America, if you want to learn the history of the Indians, you get one side, the side of the cowboy. When one came to talk of Israel, you get only one side, the side of the Zionists. You're not even allowed to look at the other side, the side of the Palestinians. That is to say, all we said in 1967 was simple. Hey, man, look, there's a problem here with two sides. This is one side. That's what we hear. Let's look at the other side and see what they say. But even if you say you want to look at the Palestinian side, they attacked you. They came to show clearly their ideological connection with imperialism and their penchant for a one-sided view of history. But today, that's no longer true. We say, even Jesse Jackson, who says he follows the footsteps of Martin Luther King, must go and meet with Arafat and find out what the Palestinians are saying. One cannot make a judgment about a war unless you know both sides. Yet Zionism keep everyone confused, only their side. And the issues that they make are unjust and immoral. How can you justify the death of 6 million Jews as the rationalization for taking the land from the Palestinians? The Palestinians did nothing to you. Hitler did everything to you. Hitler lost the war. Germany lost the war. Take your state in Germany. That's where you should take it. Even the Bible says to the victors belong the spoil. Yet the Palestinians did nothing. And they went all the way over there to Palestine. The reason why they were able to do this is because they served properly the interests of imperialism. They were so confident in their arrogance that they thought that they could stand at the tip of Africa and stretch and control African liberation movements and also control movements in the East. They're going to get crushed by both of them. Zionism must be destroyed. Judaism as a religion must be respected. Thank you. Ready for the revolution.